Are you ready to do some crimes?
Yes, that was a full rock and roll Alice Cooper intro, and a big documentary is back on your favorite channel. Welcome everyone to the C.M. Kozeman Criminal Cryptid Special Extravaganza, where we will embark on a journey so mind-blowing and so fantastic that you wouldn't be able to think straight for days on end. Welcome to the Criminal Cryptids and Other Urban Legends special. Okay, look at this amazing new budget we have. We got a new microphone, we got a new intro segment, we got even this nice criminal police light effect. And you know why? It's all because of your contributions on patreon.com and beyond. Yes, everyone, before beginning, we have to go through the routine. You have to support this channel on patreon.com, and the more you do so, the better videos we'll come up with. Also, please consider supporting Prometheum for her contributions to the intro video. It is all a big teamwork here at CM Kozeman headquarters. If you support me on Patreon, not only do you get to download this presentation for free, you also get to see many excerpts and sneak previews from my fantastic paintings, and of course the books that everyone is curious to read more of, All Tomorrows and Snayat. So there, everybody, let's put our hands in the pockets and put our money where our mouths are, because these things, you know, they don't come cheap. I have to take time off work. Everybody has to sacrifice. Okay, that out of the way, let's begin. Now, cryptids and cryptozoology, they're a big popular deal these days. You know, I don't want to go over that too much, but basically cryptozoology is this sort of so-called study of hidden animals, things like the giant squid, the Bigfoot, or even wild things like the Jersey Devil, or it extends all the way to some weird alien-like entities. It's a kind of moot and muddled field of urban legends and contemporary folklore. So in that huge diversity of cryptids, there have been attempts to classify these things. Some people classify them in a more straight-up biological or zoological perspective. Here, as you can see from this nice chart created by Tyler Greenfield here, basically he subdivides cryptozoology into subfields like the study of unknown insects, like cryptoentomology. And of course, this is one area in which everyone, regardless of where they live, you can just go outside now, turn on your porch light, catch all the insects that come up. Heck, if you live in a city, go to a dank toilet and catch the little flies there. And chances are you will discover a new species unknown to science. The study of insects is a vast and incomprehensible one. Literally, don't trust anyone who says they're an entomologist, because no single human mind is broad enough to understand the entire diversity of the insect empire. Let me say that much. Then you got fields like cryptomammalogy, which I think serves to creatures such as the panda bear, which was kind of like a myth before it was officially discovered. Also, you got in this field mundane things like this little known rabbit-like creatures in Southeast Asia, you know, nothing spectacular. This is also where you might hope to find something like the Tasmanian tiger still surviving. Then it goes all the way with fishes, herpetology. In these areas too, you got like new discoveries of new species are so commonplace that it's kind of mundane. Then you got cryptocetology, the study of unknown whales, and especially if you follow this channel, you probably know I have a big video on beaked whales, some of which are so unknown that we only know them from beached corpses, or in one memorable case, the only evidence of this entire species of large whales living in our oceans today is basically the skull somebody found in a seaside bazaar, literally. So a lot of wonder, a lot of room for wonder in here too. Then you got the study of hidden birds, which, okay, you know, even in a museum you can discover new species of birds. But then Tyler Greenfield's classification table goes into dracontology, study of lake monsters, or studies of hidden hominids. And these two last areas, they're kind of more rarefied, I think, and they're kind of like more closer to the mythical side of things. Under dracontology, maybe you can hope to find the Loch Ness monster, and under hominology, you can hope to find something like the orang pendek, which is like a kind of small human-like but also orangutan-like creature from Southeast Asia. But I don't understand why this is not sunk into cryptomammalogy. Anyways, then a few years back, I had this scheme when launching Cryptozoologicon, which is the book that Darren Naish, John Conway, and I prepared about the study of hidden animals, and basically trying to imagine hidden animals in a sort of more realistic light. And in my perspective, the study of cryptozoology is this one messy set of intersection between a spectrum of creatures ranging from the perfectly plausible, such as the unknown insects and the fish that everyone collects every day of the year, to things that are presumed extinct, things like the Tasmanian tiger and stuff like that. You know, maybe these things might be holding out there, but who knows. Then you got, so this is like a clockwise scale of plausibility. Then you got prehistoric survivors, something like a late surviving mammoth or a late surviving dinosaur in Africa. You know, these things, on paper they're plausible, but if you once get down to the nitty gritty, they kind of don't seem that plausible. But then again, we had caveats, such as when the coelacanth fish was discovered, alive and well after an interval of fossil absence that lasted millions on millions of years. Then from this point on, it kind of like goes to crazy territory with aquatic monsters. Every lake in the North American continent, maybe even the world, is full home to a particular lake monsters. Then you got myths and tall tales, and then finally you got UFO lore and dark cryptids. Like if you study cryptid fan pages online today, you got creatures from UFO cases or things like Slender Man being featured as cryptids in the same category as the Wukwang ox or unknown species of parrots and stuff. And clearly this is like a wide area where a lot of urban folklore is collected alongside some weird zoological tidbits. So it's an interesting area to study with a broad spectrum of possibilities. But let's go even deeper and let's consider today's subject in further detail. Let's look at what makes a criminal cryptid, because these are a special category of creatures and urban legends that I just discovered were lurking in plain sight. And here let's take a deeper dive into criminal cryptids. Basically, it's this weird intersection between true crime reports, urban legends, and memorable entities in said urban legends. So smack in the middle of this intersection, boom, you got criminal cryptids. To generalize even more specifically, criminal cryptids aren't some far-off creatures. They live where you live. They don't live in the mountains of Tibet or the jungles of Borneo. They live in your street, down your town, maybe in your house right now. And unlike most of these creatures, there will be some exceptions, but they're mostly regular human beings that pertain to a real or reported criminal event. And what sets them apart from common criminals is that these criminals have some sort of like memorable entity-ness about them. So they're not just any car thief, they're that car thief with a special cloak or whatever. As we are about to see, they're not any house burglar, they're that house burglar with a special mode of gas attacks. So they may display extraordinary abilities, but these are often not supernatural. But as we're about to see, there are exceptions and caveats to both of these soft rules, and more often than not, they bleed over to urban legends. Now, we're going to be studying a broad selection of criminal cryptids from mostly the United States and my home country, Turkey, but I'm certain there are many, many more. So before going on, let me just remind you, if you know a criminal cryptid from your part of the world, please write it in the comments. Not only does this help me with the algorithm, but it also really helps me with maybe making the second part of this video. So let's go! We start with maybe the OG criminal cryptid, Spring-heeled Jack from London and Britain. The reports of this guy started being published in newspapers from 1830s onwards, and he's just this like jumping evil guy who abducts women or shocks women or does nasty things to women, and he just can't be caught. Look at this guy. Get back here, you warmint! And then blasting him with a gun to no avail. This motherfucker just ignores the gunshots, jumps from roof to the ground level to the roof to roof, jumps all over the place. And this guy was really popular. He was almost like a cross between a proto-Dracula and the proto-Batman back in his day, and he shocked people left and right. There have even been cases of Spring-Heeled Jack in the highlands of the northern United Kingdom, let us say. And of course, this is just a case of media hype and a media story. Now, in my research about this character, I realized there were myths about basically ghosts in London from the time of the Great Fire of London onwards. So it's nothing new. Sometime in the 1830s or the 1840s, a bunch of newspaper people got a hold of this legend and they went wild with it. Now, it might be surprising, but if you think we have fake news now, who daddy, you're in a bit of a surprise, because until, like, basically from Victorian days until the 1950s or something, newspapers across the United Kingdom and the United States, they employ this kind of people called the rewrite man. And what the rewrite man did was they took on regular police reports or just regular news reports, or just made fucking shit up, really, and they exaggerated them. So if there was a fire, the news becomes there was a fire, but a heroic firefighter rescued 2 crying kids in the last minute. So if somebody encountered a dark, shady figure who tried to rob them, maybe it was a dark, shady figure who jumped up 3 stories. So this way the legend grew, and ultimately it became the subject of children's serials, and it took a life of its own. Remember, back in those days, there was no media oversight, there was no fact-checking, no nothing. The only thing newspaper bosses were concerned with was moving as many copies as possible. So truth was kind of ignored. So this guy took a life of its own. So with each criminal cryptid, we're going to have a verdict section. So I say this is Victorian media hype, maybe drawing on an even deeper and weirder foundation of urban legends from, let us say, Edwardian London about ghosts in the big city. Remember, these cities, a lot of people moved here from the countryside, and this is going to be a recurring theme actually, so keep your eyes peeled about this. A lot of people move here from the countryside, and the city is a weird, chaotic, and like scary place. So old legends from the old country take on new life here, and then from then on they get picked up by media and they get put through the cycle. Let us say just that much. Alright, now let's move on to our second criminal cryptid, the OG criminal cryptid. It was this thing, this person or criminal or incident or whatever it is, that prompted me to do this entire series. And it made me realize there's a class of cryptids out there that are not quite like any other cryptids. So hats off to the Mad Gasser of Mattoon from wartime Illinois, USA, in the deep dark days of the Second World War in 1944. Now, in 1944, even though the war was close to winding down, there was still, as they used to say, hell to pay. And as American soldiers advanced into Germany, they began really to suffer under basically German retaliation. And for a while, it seemed like it was going to be another World War I style trench warfare stalemate down there. A lot of people began to die, casualties began pouring in, and even in the heartland of the United States, there was nobody who didn't know anybody who hadn't lost someone. So, mind you, like, if I remember correctly, the United States suffered more like 400,000 killed in action. So it wasn't like an easy war like the ones they're having these days. So there was a really like hard and dark mood across all of the United States, and the moods were twitchy, and everybody was looking for saboteurs or infiltrators or agents, and nerves were frayed, let us say that much. And in this environment, there emerged the news of a certain anesthetic prowler in the town of Mattoon. And apparently somebody named Miss Kearney and her daughters were the first victims of this attacker. And here's a nice screen cap from the newspapers of that day. Apparently, these women were like either sleeping or sitting about, and then suddenly in the living room, they noticed a sickening, sweet odor in the bedroom. Apologies, not the living room. And then the odor grew stronger and stronger, and they grew strengthened and fainted. They woke up and they realized that they had parched throats, and something like a considerable sum of money at the house had disappeared. They had counted it shortly before they went to bed. That sounds sus. And they could have been seen counting the money from the street. Now this is sus a little, because they go out on a limb explaining that something supernatural happened and the money disappeared, and they were so certain that the money was theirs and it disappeared because they were counting it beforehand. In fact, neighbors could see them counting the money. Anyways, then this like weird case of a gas attacker, money stealer, kind of became rampant across this town. 6 more victims were recorded. In fact, like, this is the original victims. They got kind of like, oh, I'm hangover. Their feet are unusually bare. Maybe they're walking on barefoot carpet to kind of ease down the shock of fainting from this gas attack. And I mean, in the news reporting, this was like in some way strangely linked with the World War II and the accounts coming from the Second World War. It says groggy as Londoners under blah 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 this town. So they were as disoriented as people sheltering in London from aerial bombardment. So it's interesting that the news reporters basically make this link, and the whole town had the jitters. So much so that a spate of attacks were reported from this entity, the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. Nobody knows who he looked like, or even if he was a he, but this drawing, after all these reports, I mean, you can check them for yourself. Cloth, skeleton, lipstick found on the location. Miss Maxine and Francis Smith. This is bizarre because aren't these the characters from American Dad? That's a bizarre coincidence. Maxine or Francine, I don't know what her name was, but let me know in the comments. That's a bizarre coincidence, the way art imitates life. Anyway, Maxine and Francis Smith saw this thin blue smoke like vapor and heard a buzzing sound. Also, keep that now noted. Anyways, this story became a big panic in wartime and it somehow abated, but what stayed on was this representation of the gasser. He's a ghoulish figure, not quite human, elongated with long arms and weird hands and wearing this strange cloak-like thing. On his head, he's got I think the artist tried to draw a kind of saboteur's beret or a cap, but it looks like something else. It looks like an organic fleshy thing, and this whole drawing looks like a supernatural entity. Regardless of what it was, now with this illustration, the Mad Gasser has crossed the realms of common crime and has become a supernatural entity all of its own. So much so that in 1984, as a commemoration, a toy of this attacker was made. You know, this was the time of Masters of Universe and the Reagan era deregulation of toy limitations, so everything was fair game. This is the decade that gave us Transformers, He-Man, and the Masters of the Universe toys. So in that hype, they also made a Mad Gasser of Mattoon toy, and it looks like this. Now you can see clearly that this has long left the realm of humanity. It's a kind of frog-like, imp-like figure. Its hands are insect-like claws. It's got these tentacles, maybe with an association of gas, and it's wearing a gas mask to drive home that it's a gasser. And it's wearing these weird, like, pump-up sneaker, like red shoes. I don't know, maybe to highlight that it can jump in from windows or whatever. But it's a nice and weird toy, nice part of 80s memorabilia, and a nice cross-step illustrating the descent of this thing from a wartime jitters news story, basically, into something supernatural and a part of American pop culture. This is what I mean when I say that cryptozoology is a part of modern-day contemporary folklore, and it needs to be valued as such. So my verdict is mass paranoia during World War II. But if we go a little bit back and realize these women were seen counting the money, they really had the money, but they don't have the money anymore. No, maybe they spent the money somehow. You know, in those days, it wasn't all like flowery like good old days Americana. People had debts, they had an underworld, they had drug addiction. So maybe somehow, my hunch is that these women somehow lost that money and made up this excuse to kind of legitimize their thing. You know, they called the police and told this tall tale, and then the rest of the town picked it up from wartime fears, basically. And then it took a life of its own, and Bob's your uncle. My verdict is wartime mass paranoia during the Second World War. But what do you think? Do you think it was a paranoia, or was it something else? I know I got a lot of American viewers on this channel, so if you live near or around Mattoon, my hat's off to you. Anyways, let's move on to a roughly similar story with the Havana Syndrome, reported from US, Canadian, and other diplomats from Havana, Cuba from 2016 onwards. It has happened quite recently, so this is a new sort of quote-unquote criminal cryptid. It all began in the American embassy in the United States, where more than a regular number of people were started to complain about dizziness, headaches, and an incessant, weird chirping sound like cicadas. And eventually it was found out, they were hurting so badly. Oh my God. And eventually lots of investigations were launched into this event. And let's study this together. If people experience disorientation, head pressure, headache, nausea, auditory symptoms, including tinnitus or something like that, cognitive deficits, now this is hardcore, vestibular differences, this is like vertigo basically. Vestibules are these canals in your ears, and there's liquid in them, and if they tip, you realize that your orientation is changing. Now if there's a mistake there, you get dizzy out of nowhere because your sensors are jammed. And then vision changes. And let's look at how many symptoms of each we had. But I think most people had dizziness and like lack of concentration, also headache, nausea, so pretty bad stuff, huh? Eventually the new media picked up on this, and there was no shortage of like tacky, sort of lifeless, soulless infographics published in a variety of news sources. And even though this is informative, this is one of the big problems I have with contemporary culture in general. Everything has to be explained in an infographic. Look at this. What happens to people? Medical mystery name for the Cuban city where US diplomats first experienced sudden debilitating symptoms. Who could be doing this? Is it the mad gasser resurfacing in another shore after more than 80 years in hiatus? I don't know. It says no definitive cause has been found, but scientific studies have noted many of the acute symptoms are consistent with exposure to directed radio frequency energy. That is to say, maybe somebody was blasting radios or microwaves at these people. Eventually there was a government report produced, and once again this is the thing with bureaucracies, and this is the thing with media. We are heading towards a sort of inhuman, jumbled up, bureaucratic, and kind of overtly techno-scientific understanding of the world that is slightly beginning to obscure more details about life than it uncovers. So there's my warning sign as a side note for you. And let's see what this case classification process is. So, they devise a scheme, and apparently, this is a sort of yes or no. Like, did it start within 2 weeks? Did not meet. If you did not meet, you're not a likely case. Check this out. But if you do meet them, you're either a possible case or a presumptive case. How clear, how infographic, how granular. Also, there's a caveat here. For this analysis, symptoms include headache, head pressure, disorientation, nausea, vestibular difference, auditory symptoms, vision changes, or cognitive deficit. What the fuck did you end up solving here? You just made a table, you just made make-believe jobs for yourself. That's it. Imagine how much this costs to the taxpayer. And then, of course, the media really went to town with these radio weapons. Transmitter. Of course, it was alright when they were marketing their own radio weapons as a kind of like blood-free crowd control. 2-second burst can heat skin to 130 F. Wave penetrates the skin. Isn't it like weird and cruel? The same way you talk about marketing weapons, the same way you talk about curing people's like disturbances. There's something deeply inhuman and dangerous about contemporary industrial scientific culture. Let me tell you that much. Note, drawing is schematic. Oh, thank you for clearing this shit up, motherfucker. I thought this was what was I gonna get? I thought this was what I was gonna get. Get the fuck out of here. Antenna focuses the invisible energy. You see, this is like the level of comprehension they're reducing everyone to, or they assume everyone has. So stupid. And then they apply this to the Havana thing, of course. A microwave oven has been converted to a weapon. Large percentage in this room, they're like, and this is like, alright, fire the weapon. And it's like, oh, I'm feeling disoriented in the secondary room. Could it be because you're working in a windowless shithole, huh? And then this guy goes, as the radiation passes through walls, the power level will drop, but can still remain at dangerous health levels. Where's this relationship going? We can't even eat in peace anymore. And then in the final room, at least these guys have the luxury of windows, I guess. They're like, even if the way levels have been reduced, continual radiation can be dangerous for our embassy workers. It wasn't dangerous when you were brandishing how it penetrates the skin. No, it's a schematic, but no, it can still remain dangerous health levels. Okay, get the fuck out of here. And then there was no end to this. There was, from the study I made of this, like, just look at this infographic. None of these people have faces. None of these people have faces. Look at it. It's just a schematic. That's the view people view the world. Whether they're curing a disease, or they are maintaining an embassy in another country, or whether they're running their countries themselves. Forget the Havana syndrome. This really makes me angry. It makes me so mad. Anyways, I'm not even going to read this piece of shit anymore. And then the source is, of course, National Academy of Sciences. So, I think you saw that here too. They're talking with real evidence, real facts, real footnotes. The only good kind of study of this kind of whole shenanigans was published by these two people, and basically they said this is a mass psychogenic illness and the real story behind the mass embassy history. They basically say, this may or may not be one case of microwave sabotage, but these people basically spooked themselves, just like the Mad Guesser. They spooked themselves into a frenzy. This was a kind of high advanced form of placebo effect. Maybe it comes from having to work such shitty jobs. You work all day. Your life depends on taking real life and packaging into like a shitty infographic, overtly statistical understanding that's not fit for any human being to experience. Your entire life when you're working in this embassy is basically just this shit. So in that kind of environment, is it any wonder where something can go wrong and suddenly you start believing you're all under attack because secretly your life sucks. Okay, so verdicts. Maybe I'm almost certainly convinced this is like a mass placebo effect. Maybe precipitated by crickets or cicadas. I concede a faint chance of somebody using a microwave weapon, or maybe something like a pre-COVID bioweapon infecting these people. Who knows? Maybe this whole thing was a cover-up and it really was a weird bioweapon. I from my own memories during COVID and during those deeply unfair, dangerous lockdowns, I spent months in the house only going out for grocery shopping or brief walks. And then I developed COVID, and right after COVID, I had something very similar. I had vertigo attacks. I had half of my face paralyzed. I had almost everything you'll see here. I had tinnitus, hearing loss, intense pressure, difficulty concentrating. I had all of these, and I think many of you did too. I always wonder, was this a side effect of COVID, or was this a side effect of this lifeless, soul-draining regimen we all experienced during these lockdowns? And I think it was the latter. Don't get me wrong, COVID was a real disease and the vaccines probably worked, but the way the world reacted to this crisis with this kind of stupid bureaucratic infographic mentality, it really was like the least effective and the most inhuman course of action to respond to anything like this. Anyways, so maybe instead of a bioweapon, sabotage, or crickets, maybe just evil work and shitty fucked up life. Get fucked. Let's move on to another disgusting criminal cryptid, the Turkish helmet pervert of Ankara, Turkey in 2008. Now, this is a very hardcore case, so I'm just going to be very delicate about this. No funny jokes. Basically, in the city of Ankara around 2008, this guy started assaulting young girls who were quite young, and, he was remarkable in his choice of outfit. He was wearing a black biking suit and a black helmet. So he was like a dark helmet-wearing helmet rapist, for lack of a better word. And the story was like so interesting that people were acutely afraid of these figures, anybody wearing a helmet. I was a young guy at that age, so I remember like friends of mine who used to ride motorbikes around and had helmets. Like, we were joking around like, don't wear that helmet in public, they might mistake you for the rapist. And it was a real fear for a short amount of time. Then this guy was caught, and to make this whole case even weirder and kind of darker, he turned out to be basically an award-winning opera tenor singer who was just doing these things because of reasons, I guess. And his defense was especially reprehensible. He said they were going to lose their virginities anyway. So yeah, what can I say? Fuck this guy. I hope he rots in jail. I mean, this is the thing with criminal cryptids. Some stories are going to be like this, so I'm always going to be very delicate around them. But other stories are more entertaining because they're in the pure realm of urban legends. Notice that I'm like the one you're about to see now, the Black Volga legend from the countries of the Warsaw Pact. Basically, the Volga is a model of Soviet and Warsaw Pact government car, let us say. And apparently there were these cars running around, and there were like these like secret people running around with these black Volgas and abducting people. And in other countries, the Volga is replaced by a BMW or a Mercedes. But basically, I mean, anything has been blamed for these. It could be rich Westerners or Arabs after the fall of communism or during the communist years. It was either like the KGB or some weird mafia types. Or sometimes the culprits are more exotic. They blame sometimes Jews or demons or even Satan. In one memorable variant of the story, basically, the Black Volga pulls over and plate is 666. And he unrolls the windows. Not automatic, of course. These windows are like unrolled down by hand. And the devil says, "Do you know the time, stranger?" And if you're a fool and you tell him, "Oh yeah, it's 4 p.m. Then he says, "Tomorrow you will die at this hour." But if you were smart about it and just say, "It's God's time," the car would quickly vanish. So remember, if a car pulls over and it's Satan, old Satan on the wheel, and asks you, "What time is it right now?" You're never going to tell the real time. You're just going to be cool, just like Bruce Willis in Die Hard. Take a cigarette or a toothpick for emergency coolness and just say the following: "It's God's time, motherfucker. Get fucked." And you go, Satan will blow right up in his evil, evil car. Okay. The verdict is this is like an urban legend. The Warsaw Pact, in its time of isolation from the West, evolved many parallel practices and, of course, parallel urban legends. So, in that respect, it's interesting to consider. Perhaps very loosely, it could be also based on the memories of disappearances during Joseph Stalin's time, or maybe later on during the Russian invasions of Hungary or Prague, or even until the late 1980s, the uprising in Poland. So maybe it's faintly based on the culture of anonymous paranoia during the oppressive years of communist domination. Who knows? Okay, we got another criminal cryptid now. This is a person actually, and he's like quite a based and very talented singer. Robert Leroy Johnson. He's a Mississippi blues singer, very talented guy. Only on this list because he cultivated a reputation as having sold his soul to the devil. And basically, like, just listen to his songs. Me and the Devil Blues, some other nice blues songs. Really, really talented guy. Really like this stuff, to be honest. And many, many artists throughout the history of blues and later on rock and roll were like credited with like deals with the devil. Even like Marilyn Manson had these like whole spate of urban legends. When I was growing up, I was a big fan of Manson. Still am to some degree. And there was, remember, this was the age before the internet, so we only had like bootleg CDs and stuff to work on. But, you know, there was the urban legend that he had some ribs extracted so he could perform a blowjob on himself. Also, like, he was a real Satanist and he just like skinned a woman alive but was never caught because he was like too powerful or something. So now that's a more macabre version, but for this reason I just wanted to include a good sort of demonic interaction in the series. But these legends are not new. In fact, like, there have been many, many cases in Europe or early settlement time United States where, like, this is a case where, for example, the devil appears to this man in the form of a rich guy and he proposes him some, like, basically a wealth of riches in exchange of his soul, or maybe sometimes he even offers some talent, or like a variety of the story goes that the guy, whoever this guy is or a gal is, basically has a poor farm, and then the devil comes up to him and says, "Just sign this and I'll give you the best farm ever." But if this guy is smart, he just doesn't sign it, and then Satan is banished. But it's a nice retro version of this trope, that this sort of like steadfast goodness, if you do deal with the devil, you can create great accomplishments. And maybe the subtext here is that a deal with the devil perhaps is a better deal than a deal made with human companies, human agents, and human representatives. Anyways, hats off to Robert L. Johnson. It's almost the anniversary of his death at the time of recording, July 6th, 2023. Hats off. In fact, Johnson kind of did cultivate this deal with the devil image, let's say. But also he was like quite humble, based, and religious. And I mean, yeah, so there. Anyways, my verdict is a good one for this guy. Legacy of talent and hype. Once again, our criteria for criminal cryptids is that if someone is like a real person, in this case a real artist, but somehow his like public image is tainted with some sort of supernatural stuff, then I guess we can call him or her a criminal cryptid. Even though here the only thing he steals is our hearts with his amazing, amazing music. Do you know any other such artists? Just let me know in the comments, and let's move on to the darker criminal cryptid, that is the phantom social worker phenomena, reported from the United Kingdom, the USA, and from the 1990s onwards. Basically, from the 1980s onwards, people had these like pervasive suburban fears about people abducting their kids. And long story short, you can read more about it in this book called The Child Stealers by Martin Cannon, Phantom Social Workers, an American Mystery. People say that sometimes weird people dressed as bogus social workers approach their homes, and usually they approach troubled or like low-income homes and try to abduct the kids. And this has been reported in the US and also in the United Kingdom. I'm not going to get into too many specific details, but like this is a thing that is reported, and it's very scary. It even happened once in Australia, in New South Wales, of a man and a woman who allegedly visited the home of a mother and claimed that they were government caseworkers sent to check on the welfare of her kids. I don't know. I mean, the whole area of interaction between government care and bad families, it's a tangled issue. I don't want to say too much about it and commit to any perspective, but these are like, let us leave the serious aspect of the whole issue aside for a moment and just realize these are like genuine cryptid creatures. They look like people, they talk like people, but they're not who they say they are, and they're coming for your kids. This happened also in the UK, and apparently there was a big investigation launched in the 1990s. Huge sums of money wasted on bogus social worker hunt. And usually these people may have an odd appearance, maybe they wear unusual clothing, kind of like the Men in Black phenomenon, don't you think? So my verdict is suburban paranoia, dovetailing perhaps with the satanic panic that took place in the 1990s across the United States. Basically, people were looking for rings of satanic abductors and rape gangs in a place where there were none. And like a game of Chinese whispers or a game of telephone, this grew like more and more macabre and complex in each retelling. And certainly if you're a parent, some unknown people coming to take your kids away is a very, very scary thing. Also, it's even scarier that in this day and age, going back to our teams, remember, I'm not just giving you weird stories. I'm also running on a team here. Governments which function this way, for them, even kids without parents are just statistics to be managed. Not likely cases, possible cases. Fuck you. So if a government is this immense, this bureaucratic, and this impersonal, it certainly creates the incentive for such weird, almost like demonic, child abducting, changeling, Men in Black sort of parasites to exist. And it's a very, very difficult fear to disprove. It's kind of like ghosts, You may choose to not believe in them, but what if they're real? Anyways, moving on to the Zodiac Killer. There are many, many, of course, mass murderers and serial killers, and no one quite makes them like the good old United States. But I'm going to skip a lot of mass murderers because they just get boring after a while. And to be honest, it's also the same way I felt with the recent 2022 Netflix series Dahmer. Oh, Dahmer! He's so cool! perverted, but kind of hot. Come on. These people killed real people. And it's kind of pornographic, not in the sexual sense of the word, but like real people suffer because of these. And, you know, I don't want to like glamorize it too much, but the Zodiac Killer must be touched upon because he really was an entity. You know, he had his own look. In one case, I'm not going to go too deep into this either, by the way, but in one case he was depicted as wearing this kind of weird get-up, basically. And with this appearance, he moves away from the realm of true humanity and becomes a mythical cryptid figure. You look for somebody dressed like this all the time. But of course, he could be looking quite normal. But this is the way, in our mystery-starved age, this is the way how real, petty, disgusting criminals stop being human and become something else. He was also famous, the Zodiac Killer, for the ciphers he mailed to newspapers, and some of these were only recently resolved. There was one resolved in August 1969, and here he says, I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even, I mean, it's just rambling on and on and on. All the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow me down or atop my collective of slaves for my afterlife. Guy was going on an ancient Egyptian thing kind of there. And his last word has always stuck with me. Ebe orieteme tripiti. Kind of sounds like these voces mysticae from ancient curse tablets. Now, to make a big contextual leap here, after if you watch this far, just comments, I want to be your crime slave, Kozeman Daddy, and we beat the algorithm, and together we see how many people have endured me so far. Just write in the comments box, I want to be your crime slave, Kozeman Daddy, and, well, we'll see. Anyways, back to Voces Mysticae. So, in ancient times, people were as susceptible to magic spells and unknown dark weird entities as they are today. And especially in the Hellenistic and then Roman and then Arabic and then Turkish and then European worlds, people really had a profoundly deep and difficult to eradicate belief in spirits, ghosts, etc. to such a degree that there was an entire profession of a curse tablet writer. So imagine like you're a lady and there's this other lady you hate. You basically go to imagine I'm operating the curse tablet shop. Oh, hi, is this C.M. Kozeman, the curse tablet writer? I said, oh, ma'am, howdy, yes. Well, how can I help you today? And like, oh, there's this bitch at work getting on my nerves. I want you to curse her. Of course, in the ancient world, most ladies did not work. But anyways, let that be a kind of suspension of disbelief for now. So as the curse tablet writer, what I would do is, oh, I know. I must call you my spirit, Sabaoth, or Tiori, Bayo, Bafaka, Kamfifo, Forvi, Forveo, Forvan. They wrote these like binding spells, saying like, bind that bitch's arms so, you know, she may never be sassy again to such and such. Or for guys, it's like, oh, let the other twin loose so I win big on my bet to the chariot race. These are all real things, by the way. And for some reason, I mean, check this out. What is it? Sitayo litrme arami me e. And the all letter gets repeated. It's like a cipher, but without meaning. Veyavdo or fris kato hosi pipion kein. Anyways, like things like this. So I was told these things sounded a lot like this last and dark, unintelligible word in the Zodiac Killer's letter. A bit like this, huh? Wild caveat, I know, but I just wanted to share this with you. In December 2020, they sold another cipher. He says, I hope you're having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I think they sold this during lots of idle time in the COVID pandemic, by the way. I hope you can... You're trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which bringo up, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, he just says, when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise. Death. Okay, what can I say? And this, obviously, if you're interested in the Zodiac Killer, a movie I can recommend is Zodiac from 2007. Nice film with Iron Man and Mysterio in it. I've forgotten these people's names. They only seem like Marvel characters to me these days. Anyways, go watch that film. And the verdict, of course, he's an actual murderer. And there's not much more need to glorify this stupid, murderous motherfucker anymore. Moving on, we got the... That's the sound of a shotgun. Everybody knows the sound of a shotgun. In my neighborhood, everybody's got one. Everybody knows. Anyways, in 2011, Chicago, in the United States, it was already a pretty lawless town, but apparently somebody named the Shotgun Man just killed a whole bunch of over 10 people in a certain area of this already lawless city. Remember, in 1911, this was kind of mostly run by the mob. So this guy killed 11 people in a part of the streets called the Death Corner, and nobody knew who he was, but he created a kind of media furore, and once again he stopped being a common rube, a common criminal, and he became the Shotgun Man. Now he had an instrument, he had a look, he had a name, he had a kind of modus operandi, and he haunted a certain part of the city, almost like a cryptid animal haunting a certain part of a certain continent, except in this case it's a human killer. And apparently he even sent death letters and threats to people who narrowly escaped being killed by him. And this is a representative letter. We won't miss next time. La Mano Nera, the Black Hand. Obviously, these are all related to the Italian mob, which was immigrating to the United States in those days, and, joining the struggle for life in that lawless, vicious country. Remember, did you know that until after the Great Depression, the United States did not have any sort of government safety scheme for anything? It was the Great Depression who kind of led to the creation of these unemployment funds and stuff. And even as wild as the United States is now, in those days it was a truly dog-eat-dog world. So, joining the mafia, instead of being the sign of inherent criminality, was in some cases the only way to stay alive in that vicious Lovecraftian world of pre-war, interwar America. Most notably, this excerpt says, the Shotgun Man killed 15 Italian migrants in a Death Corner, and in 72 hours his record kill streak was 4 people in 3 days. Likely he moved back to Italy, and probably he was a mafia assassin brought over from the old country to clear some shit up and ruffle some feathers, and then he went back probably to Sicily, where he probably lived for a long time, far longer than the life expectancy he would have had in the United States. Okay, let's go now to another disturbed person, Ricardo Lopez, from Hollywood, but not Hollywood, California, Hollywood, Florida. There are many online documentaries talking about this guy and what he did. He was basically a normal, reclusive, solitary guy who developed an unhealthy infatuation on Björk, this Icelandic singer. And in the 1990s, she was hot stuff. I mean, not only in those days, remember, I was a young adult back then, and my father, bless his spirit, he was a purveyor of all things cool and wonderful, and he was a subscriber to the ID magazine, and also there's a UK magazine called the Face magazine, which I don't have pictures of, but these were difficult to get in those days, especially in Turkey. But it was all about the coolest new people, coolest new technology, coolest new music. It was just pop culture garbage packaged with a cool veneer. But anyways, in those magazines, Björk was the hot new thing. And some of her songs are nice, but I always, and this is my personal opinion, so if you disagree, that's okay, I always seriously dislike this lady. I find her really disingenuous. She is talented as a singer, but the whole like alien, quirky woman, blah 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 thing is just such an act. And I'd rather take the Spice Girls over a fake person like this. Anyways, though, this guy did not have that clarity of mind, and he really fell in love with Björk. And the human mind is a pattern-seeking mind, and the mind of a human brain, the mind of a human male, is even more desperate in its pattern seeking. Especially the mind of a lonely human male is the most horrible pattern seeking monster of them all. And this guy fell into the deep end. He believed that Björk was somehow trying to communicate with him. He obsessively collected all her media appearances. Like he basically stalked her. A terrible kind of fan. And then he started keeping video diaries, and in one of those video diaries he says, "My life, my art, and my plan. Comfort is what I seek in speaking to you. I am being my own psychologist. You are a camera. I am Ricardo," he said. So he recorded an endless series of such things until such a day where he kind of really lost it, shaved his eyebrows, and put on this weird makeup, war paint kind of makeup, and committed suicide in basically live camera. His body was discovered later, and it's just like a really grim, dark story. And this was his suicide shot. Like he had "The Best of Me" written in the background. Björk was playing. Björk probably did not have any existence that this guy's entire town existed, let alone the guy himself. So, but like you see the deranged quality of the pattern-seeking male mind. I'm a male myself, and like if you're a guy, just sometimes when you start seeing patterns, just always remind yourself they may not be real. Just change your perspective, loosen up, and certainly don't stalk anybody or don't pursue anybody. Come on, what are you? But in doing so, this guy once again became a criminal cryptid. He committed a real crime, quite a serious crime, to himself actually. He only hurt himself, but could have been otherwise. Maybe he could have went out and shot Björk, who knows. And then in like changing himself into this weird form, painting his face, contorting his face in these weird ways, he kind of became something beyond human, a kind of savage warrior cult-like figure. And maybe in doing so, he personally thought he achieved a sense of glory greater than anything he could have achieved, either by stalking Björk or just by living an unnoticed life. So anyways, it's really tragic. The story was so weirdly popular that it was even made into a movie called "The Best of Me," or also known as "The Obsessed," made in 2019. And it tells the story of a similar obsessed guy changing for real into a transhuman demonic entity. And I haven't seen this film, but sounds like an interesting watch. Who knows? Okay, the verdict here is, of course, mental health issues. And once again, there are a lot of YouTube podcasts out there. You say these people are absolute mad lads, or like, wow, so cool. But, when I'm tackling these subjects, maybe it's less sensational and slightly more boring. But I don't want to glorify these people's traumas or tragedies or pathologies. Okay, let's move on down to the Sandown Clown. Yeah, you're probably not gonna understand this, but I just took a half-hour break down there and cleared up my sore throat with some holes and some nice honey-dipped tea. And this is all thanks to your support on Patreon, because thanks to your support, I upgraded my computer. In previous documentaries, I used to read the whole thing in like a non-stop 3-hour marathon until my throat would literally bleed sometimes. Now I can take breaks, and it's all thanks to you. So, if you like this video, please recommend it to your friends, and also tell your friends to support me on Patreon too. Every effort is really welcome, so thank you. Okay, moving on. Sandown is a nice kind of picturesque British seaside town, a kind of place many people went for holidays. And sometime here during the 1970s, a clown-like ghost or a spaceman brandishing a weird microphone was encountered by a couple of kids. This is one of the strangest UFO cases in record out there, and The only reason it's included in this criminal cryptid here, don't worry, the clown did not commit any crimes, but the only reason it's here is that there's a remote possibility this might have been a weird hippie in some sort of costume. Remember, the British Isles are a hotbed of eccentrics and overall strange, interesting and smart people, so yeah, but whatever. So in 1978, two kids encountered this giant clone, 7 feet tall with no neck. He wore a yellow pointed hat which interlocked with the red color of his green tunic, so he was quite colorful. Anyways, he communicated to the kids by writing to a notebook in large hand, and he says, "Hello, and I am all colors, Sam." A bit like the Son of Sam murderer. Anyways, the kids asked him if he was human, and he said, this is the best part really, "Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way." And then the kids asked him, "What are you then?" And he continued, "Oh, you know, just regularly." Anyways, then he disappeared into a hut. This case is just so bizarre. Let's give it a little read. The hut was spacious with an upper level. The floor was metallic. He told the children he fed upon berries which he collected in the late afternoon. He didn't say where, but he indicated that he had a camp on the mainland. Interesting. Summing up the story, somebody named Mr. Y says, "I get the impression that Faye was somehow taken into a bubble of an alien reality created by this strange personage. He also told them he had just made the hut, so this clown had a force to manifest objects and vehicles and buildings. Very, very strange." So was this a ghost, spaceman, imagination, hoax, or hallucination? Take your pick. Just a kid's make-believe? Perhaps. But there are a number of unusual elements in the story, and it is very detailed. Well, I think this is just an underestimation of kids' imagination. And here's my nice colored picture and the takeaway quote from it. He gathered wild berries, and he ate these in a very odd manner by thrusting its head forward and somehow moving the berries back and forth between its eyes and down to its mouth, almost like a weird kind of pantomime. And then when asked whether he was human, he was like, "Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way." So the only reason this amazing story is in this video because, well, it was just too weird to pass up. And it will also serve as a kind of gateway to other clown-related weirdness we are just about to see. There's also a very slight chance this might be a weird eccentric guy with a kind of strange prop he built himself. And of course it could always be the kids' imagination. Remember, children are extremely imaginative, dare I say even more imaginative than adults, and you shouldn't take them lightly. They could construct entire worlds, entire fantasies. Heck, I mean, in our community, in this channel's community, we have people interested in speculative evolution, and even though most of these people are not kids, they have very active imaginations and they can create entire planets and natural histories. So don't underestimate the human imagination. With the sake into clowns, let's take a look at the American 2016 clown epidemic. For some reason, a lot of people reported other people dressed as weird clowns from all over the country these days. Here's one example from a local TV station. A police officer was suspended for dressing as a clown, and then all around the country, especially on local TV news stations, people started experiencing, photographing, and otherwise encountering strange clowns in weird outfits, and it quickly became a national epidemic. In fact, there was even a kind of clown map of encounters, which is kind of ridiculous. And once again, it's kind of ridiculous to tabulate something like this into a big data project. And you could go look this up. I just found this in 5 minutes of Google searches. But each dot is apparently a clown encounter. And if you go to this one in York, Pennsylvania, it says, when? September 24. Where? York, Pennsylvania. What? 8 different reports of clown sightings at York College, including one reporting a car full of clowns. No clowns are found. Were they expecting to uncover a body? Get out of here. This place is full of weird stuff like that. And I just collected a few choice bits here. In Maryland, children report seeing clowns, later admit they fabricated the clowns. No clowns were found. This is a repeating motifs. What else here? In Chula, Mississippi, small town police chief reported seeing someone wearing a mask and a multi-covered wig and overalls, but he scampered away, that rascal, and was never caught. And then somebody calling themselves the Clowny Head Smasher made a bunch of threats in this place in Colorado. And then somewhere in Idaho, people started vigilante searches for clowns. I don't know why, to find them or lynch them, who knows. And the police row had to write on Facebook, please don't participate. Whether you are trying to help or looking for an adventure, we ask you to go home. Because, yeah, especially in the rural places, like, really, you can't overstate how easily these things can turn nasty. You know, someone could get hurt. In this town in Utah, police urged residents not to shoot random clowns, although none have been spotted. So they were being extra cautious. Even though there was no clown, the police reported people not to shoot clowns, just in case. And then in in Pennsylvania State College, the students chanted, "Fuck them clowns," and no clowns were found. And then finally in San Pedro, California, 2 clowns snuck up on a woman at an elementary school. They didn't say nothing. All you could see were their eyes. They were just standing there like zombies, side by side, not saying nothing, no emotions, just standing there. Me and who, everyone? Me and who? What can I say? They were, of course, not found, and this map makes a really strong point of relating whether any clown corpses were recovered or not. Anyways, maybe this was a viral marketing campaign for the It Chapter 2 film, which came out the next year in 2017. Maybe it had to do something with Donald Trump's election, and of course the clown there was a big symbol, especially for these neo-Nazis, which used a kind of like clown world narrative. And the trick being like the world is run by clowns because some people want social justice apparently, and that's bad because I don't know why. But anyways, if you dig down deep into this meme, it's pretty much like Nazi anti-Semitism, so I don't like this shit. Anyways, this either to me was an alt-right viral campaign or viral marketing for that It movie. Certainly a lot of people had fun and no clowns were ever shot, so that was good. Something like this happened in the United States earlier though. In Boston, United States, these people reported this weird clown basically in a place called the Lawrence School. 2 men dressed as clowns were driving a van and apparently tried to entice children into the van by offering them candy. And the police said that people must be extra cautious. Please advise all students that they must stay away from strangers, especially those dressed as clowns. So this was a slightly more serious incident. Maybe some weird like stranger danger was involved. It could also be part of the Reagan era satanic panic kind of overt cautious madness. Who knows? It certainly sounds a bit more serious than the US viral clown sightings in 2016, that I could tell. Then we got Bunny Man, which is a similar kind of criminal apparition that occurred in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970. A lot of these criminal cryptids are American, by the way, and like, man, America, what a place. You know, I have a very weird relationship. Like half the time I want to live there. If I was there, I think I could like make more friends and somehow be more successful basically doing my weird art and YouTube career. But then again, sometimes I think it's something best enjoyed from afar because I'm pretty happy in the part of the world I'm in. Anyways, back to the Bunny Man. In this weird tunnel in Fairfax County, Virginia, a man in a bunny suit was seen by Academy Air Force Cadet Robert Bennett. Him and his fiancée were sitting in a car in this part of a dark road. I'm sure they were just sitting there. No hanky-panky. When a man dressed in a white suit with long bunny ears ran from a nearby bush and shouted, "You're a private property and I have your tag number." Apparently this is a big thing in the rural United States, by the way. There are these like really weird and abandoned looking places, but there's always a maniac there defending his private property. So, you know, be careful where you park your car to make out. Anyways, this guy was searched but never found. Then the bunny guy reappeared again, on the same place on Fairfax County, somebody basically saw a rabbit standing on the front porch of a new but unoccupied house built by this construction company. So it was an expansion of suburbia, and there was a weird guy with bunny ears brandishing a tomahawk or a small axe there. Oh, another detail there, that the rabbit, when this couple was making out in their car, the rabbit threw a wooden handled hatchet through the right front car window. Interesting. So using the glorious advancements of AI, I tried to visualize what this guy may have looked like and came up with this. The verdict is clear. It's a local psycho. There's one born every minute, especially in the United States. Then, in Scotland, we got a nicest weird cryptid. This is a real bloke, by the way. Apparently seen from the 1970s onwards, is the Catman of Greenock. I got a lot of Scottish fans, so cheers to you guys. Apparently there's a man with a skin as black as coal who eats rats with his bare hands, and he basically hangs around in this area of Greenock near the seaside, and basically he's a weird recluse. Somebody like this does appear on many pictures from this region. I don't know if this is like the OG guy from the 1970s. They say he was a Russian sailor who abandoned ship and was just living there with poor mental health, or if it's a more recent imitator giving new life to this old legend. I could not ascertain that, but there are many videos and like images of this guy, and it's just pretty ridiculous. But once again, this guy becomes a cryptid in his own right, because he has stopped being something just human. He's not even criminal, he's just a poor, like, weird guy, but he's become a symbol. Like, there's only one Catman. There are many homeless people, but there's only one Catman of Greenock in this very, very adorable and like wholesome video. Remember, this is Scotland. The camera recording at like 144p or whatever zooms into this Catman guy, and he's like there, and the guy who's doing the filming, of course this is Scotland, and he says, "I Catman, you're right down there," and then Catman does heh, and then he smiles, and I think that's just really wholesome. And I hope whoever this guy is, he has a nice life. Catman, come over here. In Istanbul, people care for cats all the time. So maybe it's a folktale that somehow became an urban legend. Maybe it's a real life unfortunate, or maybe it's some fame-seeking geek trying to like latch on to the popularity of this legend. And if that's the case, it's like a sign. It's an interesting case of a legend becoming real in a weird way. And I just think that's something neat about local folklores in general. If there's no monster, sometimes the myth can make its own reality, and that's always cool to consider. Anyways, then we have got the Claverham Gimp, seen in Somerset, UK in 2022, so a recent occurrence. Once again, we have got the overtly scientific, clear infographics going on with this face. Take a look at this. Anyways, creep in gimp suit chases terrified woman. Police dispatch chopper to find robber bandit. Multiple sightings of Gimp Man in Claverham in Yatton, Somerset. So, in these two places, separated by maybe 1 kilometer or something, and we got like clear images of this guy. In one case, he was just walking. In another case, he was just, I've actually seen the film here, and he's just like crawling among muck and mud, being sensual and stuff. Now, I at this point want to ask, how did you obtain this recording of me? Nobody was meant to see this. Come on! That was a joke. But apparently this was not me, but someone named Joshua Hunt, and blah blah blah. He was gyrating against the floor, and some of what happened is captured on mobile phones. Since when is that a crime? It's weird, but I don't think he didn't do nothing wrong. Especially like if he didn't assault anybody. Come on. The witness was with his friend, and the defendant was seen grabbing his penis over the top of his clothing, and he was wearing what is generally known as a gimp suit, and had over his head a mask which was shiny in nature. I love this sterilized language describing. So it's just lust for life, in my opinion. There's nothing weird about this, but this guy, Joshua Hunt, became a genuine a genuine criminal cryptid. And I don't know, I only have sympathies for him, and I hope he wasn't up to any nefarious, no good acts. Looks like he just ran into the wrong lady. I mean, some people, if they saw a GIMP like this, they would just start making out with this. Man or woman, I don't care. Anyways, it's a verdict, case lost for life. Then there are honorary mentions. Like if you just search the news for like mask intruder or something, you see many cases, and we can't like look at each as a criminal cryptid, but let's just go over quickly. This guy from Boston, on college students terrorizing a kind of frat place or whatever. Some students who live in the area in Brighton say this isn't the first incident that made them worry about their safety. Probably a frat boy looking for notoriety in Boston College. Another woman's warning after creepy bus journey with masked man, reminiscent of Luther character. Whereas clearly this guy is seeing, this guy seen here is wearing a Spirited Away mask, the mask from the character No Face, and apparently he was just riding a bus, and the lady felt threatened by him and filmed him, so he became another urban criminal cryptid legend. This one is more like a genuine criminal. They killed somebody, and a man wearing this mask was observed using the victim's credit card, so a darker story there. And then in Brisbane, near Mount Gravatt, this masked intruder was walking around some houses and shot into one, so a more dangerous case. But in all these cases, these people have stopped being human and have become these like entities. Just look at this. Masked person ringing doorbell raises concerns in Las Cruces. So concerning. An honorary mention among these masked villains must go to Dark Jones, who made the news in the UK in 2021. Basically, he published an online video with a crossbow saying that he would assassinate the then monarch of Britain, the Queen, who has since passed away. And inspired by Star Wars, he says, I am sorry for what I've done, and I will attempt to assassinate Elizabeth. This is the revenge for those who have died in the 1919 Jallianwala Bagh massacre. It's also revenge for those who have been killed, humiliated, and discriminated on because of their race. I am an Indian Sikh, a Sith. My name was Jaswant Singh Khail. My name is Dark Jones. So once again, this common motif of like becoming something beyond human, maybe through crime or maybe through wanting to be a criminal, once again reasserts itself. Is certainly a pattern. This based Darth Vader character, he's talking about the Amritsar massacre, by the way, when the British killed hundreds, if not thousands of people in India for completely unprovoked reasons. Basically, these people were protesting for a salt tax or something, and then they just like indiscriminately started shooting them. One of the dark and surprisingly unreported cases in the history of the British Empire. What can I say? Though I'm glad this guy didn't do any crimes, but it kind of is like, I must pick my words carefully. I think he had his heart in the right place. A lot of things like this happen, and the victors get the right history. My verdict is, with all of these masked people, like, remember, this thing happened in 2021. If it hadn't been for the COVID lockdowns and the collapse of people's livelihoods in that time, do you think this guy would have done this? Come on. All these people. Can anybody really stay sane in the current day and age? Like, really, throughout the charnel house of human history, our current techno-scientific civilization, okay, we have some comforts unlike anybody else, but mentally, I think no other age has been as taxing for human beings. So can anyone stay sane after 2020? Don't blame the gimps, man. Blame society. Oh, let me take some water just to clear my throat. Oh, my throat is killing me. Anyways, then we have the Monkey Man wave of sightings, which took place in Delhi, India in 2001. Can't believe it's been 22 years since this thing happened. So, a weird, like, humanoid monkey-like creature, sometimes with, like, springs on its feet or with claws of steel in its hand and something like a remote control in his hands, in his other hand, some sort of weird belt, and a smart gear helmet was observed by multiple witnesses in certain parts of Delhi, and it made it into all sorts of local newspapers, and the police were searching for this guy. Apparently, it was a big deal. Over 350 sightings were reported, and people really panicked. 2 people apparently jumped down from windows or tops of buildings in fear of this monkey man, and they unfortunately died. And it was just a kind of, once again, going back all the way to Spring-Heeled Jack. Remember, it was loosely based on old legends about ghosts in London. And then the media made a field day out of it and had a frenzy. And the frenzy propagated the story, and it grew and grew uncontrollably. Something similar seems to have happened here in this once British-ruled part of the world. And once again, the sort of cycle reasserts itself. I don't know if this monkey man was ever a real thing, but people's fears certainly were real. In a similar vein, we have the Popabawa or Shaitani panic in Zanzibar, which is a small island nation in Africa. And from the 1850s onwards, there was reports here of, well, basically something called the Popabawa, which was like described as being like a bat-like flying creature, sometimes reported with one eye. And there has been a great academic study done on this phenomenon by Martin Walsh called the politicization of the, I'm never good with this word, the politicization of Popabawa, changing explanations of a collective panic in Zanzibar. And according to Mr. Walsh, these panics have been occurring since the mid-19th century, and after basically numerous iterations, basically he says these panics preceded or came immediately after a real-life political upheaval. Apparently this Popabawa attacks homes at night and attacks everyone, men, women and children, and well, its modus operandi is it's either like a poltergeist or it sexually assaults and basically rectally violates man and woman. And this part of it is just so over the top. I'm just resisting the urge to say anything spicy because, you know, it's a serious subject on the other hand. So anyways, this guy basically in 1995 had its most latest recorded panic, and it happened right after Ramadan. Some people started seeing Popabawas and started chasing them and forming vigils to catch them. In the 3rd of April in Unguja, people say they killed a Popabawa, and this was somehow exhibited at a hospital, but nobody knows what happened to these bodies or what they looked like, which is just interesting. But really kudos on to Martin Walsh for studying this phenomenon in depth. There really seems to be something at the intersection of urban living, political upheavals, and dare I say maybe colonialism somehow features in this that creates these things. I don't know. And here Mr. Walsh writes, historical and other social memories, phobias, terrors and settled anxieties most likely do and have influenced the content of narratives like those of Popabawa, and some of these narratives seem to have prefigured their subsequent explanation in narrow political terms. So we don't know if it's correlated, we don't know if it's causation, but there does seem to be correlation in the very least. So let's give a combined verdict to Monkey Man and Popabawa altogether. In my personal understanding of these cases, these events, the latest Popabawa panic and the Monkey Man panic of Mumbai in 2001, they all happened in like cities mostly, where people have been moving in from a rural background in like big and unhealthy crowds. The same was the true of the Spring-Heeled Jack creature, remember? So maybe it's a pattern of traditional fears re-emerging in the mental ecosystem of a crowded modern city, and certainly that ecosystem is not a healthy one. I mean, if you look at anybody's lives in a big megalopolis, it's really infernal. You are rarely in control of your own time. You get to do things that other people want you to do at times other people want you to do, and it's just nightmarish. Especially if you contrast that with rural life, where you have the, okay, admittedly, drudgery and like other risks associated with farming, but in a farming lifestyle you also have long periods of time where you just don't do nothing, you are just lazy, or you just, I don't know, while away the time. And that seems to be a very healthy and human thing that people have lost in the cities and in the developed world. You have to be productive now, you have to be hustling, you have to be doing some work, creating some output, some graphs, some bureaucratic shit to explain stuff, reduce time and life into a self-serving series of figures and numbers. And once again, I'm telling you, this criminal cryptid thing is just the Cosman pilling, my red pill for you, that you have to realize. The so-called scientifically developed, technologically advanced, healthy lives we lead are secretly, they have a very infernal side about it. No other time saw this much control over human beings' souls, really, what you do with your time. And sometimes, I really ask myself, is this really worth it? And it's a fight I keep having with people around me, sometimes people very close to me. Why do you always have to want more? Remember from the Bjork episode, I talked about my father and how he was like a big fan of ID magazine or Face, and like, I hope he's listening to this and maybe he will understand. He had this kind of secular, Western educated, urban Turkish person's prejudice that you had to want more from life, you had to be more modern, use the modern things, consume the modern things, read the modern things. It doesn't make anybody happy. Everybody is depressed. And nobody around me gets this. Like, it's better not to go up old unless you have kids or something. But even with them, there's just no use. If you're in a town, people want to move to a city. If they're in a city, they want to move to fucking New York or London. Fuck that. Why? So you can slave some more? Get the fuck out of here. I mean, find a small house, own it, and just spend like 70% of your life not doing anything. You will have a healthier life. Just muck around. Eat at less luxurious restaurants. Don't go on holidays. Who the fuck cares? Life becomes a holiday. The amount of control technology and scientific advancement have over people's times is really concerning. Everybody is complaining about, look, I've been working in the advertising industry, so I'm not completely out of this loop either. And it's very challenging to get out of. But I've been in the advertising industry since the early 2000s, and all the time we get youth polls over like basically what young people feel like the most, because companies want to sell shit to them. So until the 2010s or something, the greatest emotion that young people experienced was boredom. Kids were saying, we were bored, there's nothing to do, blah blah. Now it's depression and mental issues. They're scurrying around like rats, these poor kids, especially the kids born after the year 2000. I mean, geçmiş olsun. I really feel bad for them. With no goal, no one told you where to run, you missed the starting gun. It's awful. Anyways, that was a long aside, but I hope you agree with me, and if you do so, just let me know in the comments. I mean, life is so depressing that, in contrast, like a good old fear with something like Papa Bawa or the Monkey Man, it adds a sense of color. It's really weird. Oh man. Anyways, and then in line with what I just told, then we have these criminal cryptids, the COVID ghosts or the Pokong, reported from Java, Indonesia in 2020 during the height of the COVID pandemic, where everybody was forbidden to go out of their houses, but you could still ride the public transport if you were a poor person going to work for the factories. If you were middle class or richer, you could sit at home and do your shitty white collar job from your laptop. But apparently, if you rode the public transport, it didn't help with the COVID. Anyways, this was like a completely irrational and mad time in our recent history. And in this part of Indonesia, in Java, these guys made a kind of community awareness campaign, basically urging people to stay off the streets. As you probably know, Indonesia has this massively rich and grotesque tradition of weird spirits and ghosts. So they dressed up as these ghosts and started terrorizing the streets, walking around, warning people to stay at home and not to kind of associate with each other because they might catch the disease. I mean, certainly COVID, of course, is real. I'm no disease denier. I'm not even a vaccine denier. But these diseases did not kill if you took a 5-minute bus ride or spent like half an hour in the subway. With the way you look at the epidemic, it shows that if you had more personal mobility, the disease was transmitted more and more people died as a result. So it's not everyday trips to your work or everyday trips within your neighborhood, but if you were British or an American and you could have the means to travel to another county or another city very easily. And remember, before COVID, especially in the States, there were things like people used to fly in and out of their jobs every day. like some cases. With more mobility came more mortality. I think they really didn't get the point here, but everybody was panicking and an entire generation was damaged in the mind as a result. Anyways, these ghosts did their job, and like they used them for distancing patrols as if that was any good. Everyone was putting on a show back then. One account says, since the Pokong appeared, parents and children have not left their homes, and people will not gather or stay in the streets after evening prayers. Somehow, I guess the virus is not is not transmitted, I guess, during evening prayers. But after that, oh, heaven forbid, should you enjoy a loose moment with your family or friends. God damn it, it's a PR stunt. I hate this. Fuck this. Move on. Then, speaking of disease, we got some of the darkest criminal cryptids out there, bug chasers and gift givers, reported from the 1990s onwards from the USA. This is such an unhinged thing that it's also really serious, because it's about the AIDS epidemic, and it's just like so grotesque that like I'm warning you in advance, where you're going, you're not going to need eyes to see. The accounts you're about to read are very grim and bizarrely fetishistic. Anyways, it all started out with this article in the Rolling Stone magazine in the early 2000s. Basically, they said it's about the man who want to get HIV positive. So I don't know why, but then in the internet there were these whole accounts of, basically, I'm not going to read this text, you can read it. So these guys claimed to meet each other, and they would like cut each other's intestines and commit sodomical acts, and then like transmit fluids back and forth and just spread the bug. And for them it was a big sense of release and like a bizarre thing, or so they claimed. I mean, I get the sense of wanting to become filthy, and like filthy stuff is I think legitimate kink, but I don't know how often this happened. I mean, there's this mock website, this wasn't real, but apparently you could find people with AIDS and get their disease. And then earlier there were like these CNN sensation stories about people longing to get AIDS. I think this is a bit about male sexuality. Look, we are an inferior kind, us guys. We just look for patterns really hard, and in those patterns we always want to find sex, and when we find sex we just want to go out there and die like a fucking insect. So in a distant way I get it. Like, if this disease is something everybody's worrying about, these guys are saying, okay, let me at least get it, and I will die, whatever, but at least I will be able to enjoy my pleasures to the excess. Anyways, it seems that this was not as common as the news made it out to be, and some of these web postings were just like, I think, people writing sexy fiction, basically. So my verdict for bug chasers is tabloid amplification of some sort of rare but extreme sort of paraphilia. So there. A strange reflection of this did happen in Turkey, and I'm sure I got viewers from all around the world, so maybe you have similar stories from your parts of the world too, so just let me know if that's a thing. But in Turkey during the 1990s onwards, especially during the worst parts of the AIDS epidemic, we had this fear of syringe people. So what happened is, like, you would go to a cinema, I don't know, watch Braveheart or some shit, and you're going to sit down and you're like, what's that? Nani, it's a blood-filled syringe with a letter attached. It says, enjoy the rest of your life with AIDS. And people believed in this so much. Like, I remember my parents were worried about me not going to cinemas in a certain place or a certain part of town because people might be doing the AIDS syringe thing. It was ridiculous. It was so stupid. The same people who think getting magazines with Bjork on it is a cool thing were legitimately believed that there could be like AIDS syringe people. God damn. Anyways, in 1996 this thing made it to the news, and what happened is, like, a student at a certain school in certain part of Ankara said at 7 a.m. some woman with black headscarves and with their eyes like boogeyman, it says gözleri öcü gibi kadınlar, stabbed me with an AIDS infected needle. I don't know how this girl got this. Then this girl was like rushed to tests, and the test came out negative. Obviously she was making shit up. Remember, this was during 1996, which was a very convoluted time in Turkish history, to say the least. The secular military state establishment really tried to create a boogeyman in basically practicing Muslims. So this is why this little girl is complaining about the AIDS needle woman having a black headscarf, because according to this lady, she was a regressive and, oh, they are so evil, they do anything. And then anyways, it's a part of Turkish history that I got my thoughts about, but suffice it to know that they're shared by a great number of people. So I asked AI to create me these women with eyes like boogeymen and syringes and dressed in black scarves, and like I got this image, and then I got this image, this last one, ooh, stab me, mommy. And then the phobia came back to life in 2017, this time in Istanbul, where there's this disgusting big public transport called the Metro bus. And it's the only way to beat the traffic, because Istanbul has 20 million people living in it, if you can believe it. That's more than some countries. So the only way to beat the traffic is to ride this thing called the Metro bus. And this is a hastily constructed, imagine a separate bus lane, which you board from like the most dystopian and darkest highway underpasses. So everybody huddles there like rats. Anyway, something happened, like some woman lost it there. So this woman said, I boarded the Metro bus at 10. After a few stops, a lady came and asked me if I could sit with you. I said, why not? I moved towards the window. She started pushing me. I thought she was psychologically damaged and turned away. Then I felt a cramp in my leg. I looked and saw the tip of an injector in my leg. And then she quickly put the injector away. I don't know who has the mental problems here. And then I grabbed it from off her hand. I shouted, why did you stab me? What did I do? She didn't respond, just stood and stared. When I saw the injection, I started screaming, and some other ladies started screaming, saying, call the cops, call the cops. And then someone came over saying, oh, calm down, I'm a cop. And then at the Edirne Kapı stop, which is like fucking middle of nowhere, the plainclothes police officers came by saying, get off, we're gonna do a routine security check, blah blah blah. Nothing happened. I don't know. It's just, I mean, if you're forced to ride this fucking infernal bus for every weekday, I'm sure you could have these delusions too. In fact, like being stabbed by an infected needle is probably a better outcome than having to ride the Metro bus. And once again, just like the Delhi case or the Popabawa case or the Victorian London Spring Hill Jack case, life in these cities is so harsh that these monsters or these monstrous occurrences in comparison are more desirable subconsciously. In 2015, there was also a kind of dramatic incident in a kind of local forum, a very, very high quality forum of high quality people, if you can understand this. And the message went, someone with AIDS took an AIDS-filled syringe in the cinema seats, placed it upright so that other people can have AIDS. Now let's be careful, everyone. Let's not go to the cinema. If you go, just remember, this has happened before. So can you understand what a mentally depraved and deranged thing this kind of extreme fear reaction is? Never go to the cinema because some maniacs might be placing syringes there. Get fucked. I really wish everybody who thought like this just... Anyways, then the response came, this is a commonplace occurrence in this forum. The kind of cynical person comes in now and says, the virus can only survive for half an hour in moist surfaces. It's a very weak virus. And then the original poster says, that's why it's in a syringe, motherfucker. And then, this is the kicker, this lady comes, her name is Ariana Grande. Can't we see this huge ass syringe? Duh. And it's just ridiculous. And this is just urban hysteria, the inhumanity of life in big cities, mixed with this perverted quest for safety. It's just the sleep of reason produces monsters. What can I say? And then, in a similar vein, in the United States, you had the ankle slicing car thieves. It's a common urban legend from the 1970s onwards. Basically, you get into your car, but there's somebody there waiting under the car. He slashes your ankles, not your uncles. He slashes your ankles, and I don't know, rapes or like kills you or steals your grocery or whatever. this thing sometimes makes to the news. It says a man was once arrested for hiding under cars to touch women's feet, and his defense was ridiculous. I was just hiding under the cars simply for the visual. Then he was arrested. At least this fear has found a new life in TikTok, where many women like check for ankle slashers or like jump in the car to like avoid ankle slasher, and just kind of turn their panic and their fear of strangers into a marketable form of content. What can I say? This is a sad state of affairs. I mean, this sort of thing almost never happens. Suburban hysteria is my verdict. But what do you think? If you're from the United States, what do you think about this incident? Let me know in the comments while I enjoy some well-deserved, soothing, balmy Kozeman tea. Oh, yeah, let's power through this shit. Then you got the urban legend of black-eyed children. This is a story more close to these alien stories, and it's been reported from the USA and the UK from the 1980s onwards. The UK tabloid press has a field day with this, and every now and then they report these black-eyed mysterious children aged 6 to 16. They walk up to people's doors and like ask for mundane things like, can I use the bathroom and stuff, and they're just like very scary. And I mean, the UK press, as you can see here, in Staffordshire there was apparently a plague of black-eyed ghost children, and this might be an urban legend, but this might actually be the origin of the name for the band, the Black Eyed Peas. I don't know. Anyways, there are many accounts about these things online, and I just here copy and pasted one of the most visceral by a guy called Brian Bettel. There's a slight chance he might listen to this podcast, so, well, hello, Mr. Bettel. Apparently, he was driving a car, and two kids aged 9 to 12 with hooded pullovers, like South Park style, wanted a ride to the movie Mortal Kombat, and he looked at their eyes, and they were black, and they said, we're just two little kids, we don't have a gun or anything. And he was consumed by intense terror. Their eyes were soulless like vast expanses of starless night, and he found a name for this phenomenon called BEKs, Black-Eyed Kids. Personally, I wouldn't have chosen that acronym, but it's what the internet has adopted. And since that incident, he apparently thinks about what these boys were and what it means in a cosmic sense. So these are the more supernatural criminal cryptids. There's nothing quite criminal about them, except maybe they kind of pertain to missing kids and stuff. But yeah, this is the UK tabloid press. Chilling hauntings baffle experts. Black-eyed child ghost haunts strictly babe. I don't know. The other headlines too, like girl 17 kills 9 jihadi troops. You gotta hand it to British for writing like this. There's a like weird but adorable thing to UK tabloid writing, let me say that much. Of course, this story probably is psychologically linked to the legend of the changeling from basically time immemorial. Many cultures have these legends. A changeling is basically a human child. Basically, fairies come to your baby, take your baby away, replace it with a fake baby, which is kind of like your baby, but all uncanny and creepy. And so I consider this story to be a modern reincarnation of the changeling story. This is the great watercolor painting, The Changeling by Henry Fuseli. And I mean, this story has also featured in like early Renaissance paintings too. Here the demon is taking away the baby and replacing with the other baby, because you can see he has horns, but this one doesn't. He had a halo, but this one has horns. Damn old Satan. Anyways, I think in certain cases this changeling myth was a convenient way to explain infidelity or kids that really didn't look like their parents. You know, you can't argue with God and demons, so that's an easy way out. And also, this story is echoed multiple times in contemporary alien abduction lore, where sometimes people report being abducted by aliens and like fathering children and like seeing or holding their own hybrid babies. Especially in the United States, this is like, there are many accounts like this. I know one of the viewers of my channel, he's a good friend online. He may have more to say about this phenomenon. What do you think? Maybe the changelings have been aliens all the time, or maybe it's a more human instinct finding new outfits as technology permeates and taints our time. You can no longer have demons, so they have to be techno-scientific space aliens. Who knows, but the verdict is clear. Childbirth and children are some of the scariest things in life. I mean, thank heavens I don't have a kid. My brother just had one, almost a year old now, and my brother aged 10 years in 1 year. Half his hair is gray, he's got that 1,000-yard stare, he's always worried about his finances and future. The baby is really cute though, but like, this is the absolute total terror of any adult. So there. Then moving on to something like slightly more charming, we got the Serbian dancing lady, reported apparently from Belgrade in Serbia in 1998, but it found its own life in 2019. Basically, this video of a strange woman dancing uncannily in the street and someone recording her in low resolution, and there have been many imitations of this, and of course it did find new life in TikTok in the US too. So it says Serbian dancing lady face reveal, but it's also apparently in a shopping mall parking lot. Serbian dancing lady in Norway. And also in India, it kind of became an internet meme kind of sensation. I don't know what this story is, but if this original video indeed was real, and it might just be a fake that started in 2019, but if this thing was real, in Serbia and Bosnia and Croatia, they had a horrible civil war in which many people died. They lost their family members. There's been ethnic cleansing, genocides, rapes. So in an environment like this, you shouldn't be surprised if like a woman loses it and starts just dancing in the streets like there's no tomorrow. The creepy thing is not the lady, but the creepy thing was this war and the way the Western world, with salivating grimaces, watched and encouraged Yugoslavia to destroy itself. I humbly send out my respect to every one of my viewers who was born or has links to the former Yugoslavian states. None of you deserve this, and if there's any justice in this world, they will pay. Okay, let's move on. Probably it's an urban legend based on war trauma. Then, in the same region, but earlier in time, we had the vampire witches of Tarnovo from the Ottoman Empire in 1833. Well, the long story short is that there were two Janissaries terrorizing this village in Tarnovo, which is in present-day Bulgaria, but was like a core part of the Ottoman Empire back then. Remember the Balkans, Bulgaria, Salonika, parts of Greece, Albania, the former parts of former Yugoslavia. For the Ottomans, they were not just colonial possessions, but they were the heartland of the empire. It's like if tomorrow Mexico invades Philadelphia and Philadelphia becomes an own country. They were the like most well-developed, the most well-developed, well-united parts of the Ottoman Empire. Anyways, two Janissaries were terrorizing this town, and even after they were killed, they apparently turned into vampires. Here is a newspaper article from the Takvimi Vakai newspaper from 1833. Most of you think Ottomans to be like ancient, antiquated, or backwards people, but actually for a lot of contemporary history, they had newspapers, telegrams. I mean, they were like a modern society for their time and age. So there were reports of these manifestations of vampires in Tarnovo. To the graves of these two Janissaries, which were like kind of like rebellious, mutinous soldiers who turned into warlords in the absence of new wars to win. So they were found in their graves with their hair grown, their fingernails grown, and their eyes were reportedly full of blood, look terrifying. When they were alive, these men had committed all kinds of rape, mischief, theft, and murder, and because they were coming back to life apparently to terrorize people, the locals removed them from their graves. Wooden stakes were driven to their bellies, and their hearts were boiled with a cauldron of water. And then the exorcist said it didn't work apparently. I don't know how they come to that. I wonder how they came to that conclusion. Apparently it didn't work, but then they said we must burn these corpses, and they were burnt. Now, this story, the Ottoman vampire story, especially in my home country Turkey, all of these like Cryptid or like 40 fanboys run wild with it without ever noticing the greater context. They say, oh, we got vampires too, how cool, vampires. Let's look at the date, okay, it's 1833. Then let's talk a little bit about the Janissary Corps. The Janissaries were sons of Christian women and families who were conscripted into the Ottoman army and raised as expert fighters. They converted to a special and ultra-heterodox branch of Islam called the Bektashi branch of Islam. And they were really distinct from other, let's say, like run-of-the-mill Muslims in farms or cities. They had their own thing going, and they were expert warriors until the Europeans were able to mobilize more like quote-unquote modern armies with like disposable soldiers for using firearms. They were like the strongest fighting force on earth, and they left a great mark in the eyes of the foreign artists who visited the lands of the Ottoman Empire during its zenith. More like, you see, they're not vampires, they're like dignified warriors, professional warriors, a bit like the samurai. In fact, towards the end of their reign, because the Ottoman Empire reached its natural borders and it slowly began to lose wars against the West, these guys turned into brigands and criminals and local warlords, and some of them even were like national heroes, like this guy, Georgios Kastariotis, Iskender Bey. So he started out as a like Janissary general, and then changed sides and fought with the Venetians, and then became one of the formative figures in the history of Albania. So my shout out goes to my Albanian viewers, by the way. So you can see it was like a formative branch of the Ottoman military, but towards the end of their reign, they caused more problems than they solved. They dethroned several sultans, and they were basically like an unwelcome element in Ottoman society. So in 1826, the Janissary Corps was dissolved in a bloody event called the Vakai Hayriye, which was called the auspicious event. People were so sick of these guys, they were glad to be rid of them. Now all these Turkish fanboys go, oh, vampires. Motherfucker, look at the date, 1833. Just less than 10 years after the Janissary Corps dissolved. This was published in a newspaper. What do newspapers mean? Especially in Turkey. Propaganda. Motherfucker. You're just so colorblind. I don't get this. This is clearly a case of anti-Janissary propaganda after this order of warriors was forcibly dissolved. And you know, you don't need to go too far back in Turkey's recent history to see similar instances with local coups and like weird religious orders and stuff like that. You need to really like vilify and cast these guys as demons so that they never come back again. And this seems to be a time-honored reflex of the Turkish state and the Turkish ruling media class. They're not vampires for the heck of it. They're vampires because they want to be. Basically, this is anti-Janissary propaganda. Anyways, moving on. Speaking of vampires, you also have something called the Highgate Vampire, which kind of was like a center of a big scare in London in 1969. Something called the British Psychic and Occult Society began receiving reports of a tall black apparition stalking the tombs of London's Highgate Cemetery. And then people were really scared, with looking for a dark man with glaring eyes. And then the foxes started dying, says this British anecdote, because I guess, oh no, not the foxes! Anyways, these are the other news stories, like this vampire hunter guy named David Farrant is stalking. Remember, this is the age of the Hammer House of horror movies, so I guess people were really inspired by those things, huh? And it seems that this guy is just putting on a show, this Alan Farrant guy, stalking vampires. Fearless Alan Farrant was back on the trail of his deadliest enemy yesterday, and that's enough to make any blood-sucking vampire turn in his grave. Especially the dreaded vampire of Highgate. 24-year-old guy. This guy's a baby. Look at him. And this is what another thing I like about British press. Every section there's a kind of headline that vaguely pertains to the story. So it's ivy-covered walls, certain, hunt, or like crucifix, like this one word. I love this about the British press. Nice part of the world. Anyways, this is just another tiring vampire story. There are so many of these, but it kind of counts as a criminal cryptid, even though nobody has a photo of this vampire. I think the real cryptid here is Mr. Farrant himself. He seems to be like a really charming, like attractive guy searching for vampires here. I'm sure he scored some tail this way. Anyways, moving on. Then we got urban legends about haunted artworks in Italy and beyond, the most famous of which is the Crying Boy, painted in 1950s in Italy. But I can attest that this portrait has spread to many parts of the world. It's very popular in Turkey too. You usually see it in like less than well-to-do shops and stuff, but apparently this portrait was cursed. Once again, in the UK, this picture was blamed for a fire, and once again you see the intermediate headlines: suffer, blazing curse of the Crying Boy, picture is a fire jinx. Okay. Crying Boy curse strikes again, print undamaged as family's home burns, by Dick Saxty. What sort of a name is that? Send them to us, said this newspaper, because they actually organized a collection of these paintings, and then they burned them all, destroying and getting the land rid of these pyromaniac children for once and all. You gotta love the UK press. There have been like similar paintings described as being cursed, such as this one, Death and the Child by Edward Monk, the guy who famously painted the Scream painting. A memorable side quest here must be the life and the art of Arshil Gorky, who was born in Turkey's Van province as an young Armenian. Then he suffered the horrible events that everybody outside of Turkey describes as genocide in 1915, and he had to run away. He had a troubled marriage, but he kept on painting and painting and painting. Basically, I gotta read this. So his marriage was deteriorating when then he realized that his wife was having an affair with another painter, and then he was left alone. He had a kind of car accident. He broke his back and neck, and basically he was like crippled. And then he already was traumatized by the events of 1915, and basically he hanged himself. Really sad tale. Such a pity though, because he was immensely talented. I mean, I'm up there with Picasso, Miro, or some of the constructivists. I don't know. I just felt bad for this guy. His art also was apparently quote-unquote cursed, because they were loaded to a plane to Los Angeles for an exhibit, and the airplane crashed, killing everyone. And apparently the curse of this painting was sometimes blamed for this horrible accident. Anyways, then closer to the present day, you got this famous cursed eBay painting, The Hands Resist Him. Apparently they said this was cursed with like hands in the background of this creepy looking doll and the creepy looking child. It was claimed that the characters moved during the night, a bit like Harry Potter, and it kind of became an internet meme, a sensation. And sometimes people say they were violently ill, and observers claim to be gripped by an unseen entity. Experiences including an exorcist type of voice, along with a blast of hot air, like standing in front of an oven door. I think the Ghostbusters had a sort of similar story, right? The 1980s or 1990s Ghostbusters 2. It had a painting of a Carpathian demon guy, and he was like really evil, and the painting was cursed. Anyways, verdict here is kids are uncanny. Artists often lead tragic lives, and people just love tragic stories. Because it didn't happen to them. Happened to that other guy. Then close to the end, we got the Dark Watchers phenomenon, which are these like weird dark silhouette like creatures people inhabit while trekking in parts of California. I think these are memorable because they find place in literary works of their times, such as this poem, Such Counsels You Gave to Me, by Robinson Jeffers. Some guy is walking in the mountains, and he thought it might be one of the Watchers, who are often seen in this length of the coast range, forms that look human to human eyes, but are certainly not human. They come from behind ridges to watch. But when he approached it, he recognized the shabby clothes and the pale hair and even the averted forehead and concave line from the eye to the jaw, and he was not surprised when the figure turning toward him in the quiet twilight showed his own face. Then it melded, and merged into the shadows behind it. An entity report from High Literature. That's nice. John Steinbeck also kind of has something like this in his Flight. A character named Pepe is walking in these mountains, and once on a white barren spur he saw a black figure for a moment, but he looked quickly away, for it was one of the Dark Watchers. No one knew who the Watchers were, nor where they lived, but it was better to ignore them and never to show interest in them. They did not bother one who stayed on the trail and minded his own business. So cool. Wouldn't it be nice to live in a world like that? Well, lucky us, we do live in a world like this. This phenomenon, I think, was the inspiration behind, by the way, the Pneum characters in the Planet of Adventure series of science fiction books written by the inimitable Jack Vance. This series is set in an alien world where there are multiple races of intelligent beings, all of them kind of like humans. But the deal with the Pneum is they appear like hallucinations in the outskirts of like dead cities and mountains. And then later on in the series, it turns out that these are not really apparitions, but they really are like a race of non-human beings. In fact, they are this world's original inhabitants, and they have been here for millions of years, watching the rise and fall of literally something like dozens of alien civilizations, and they have their own hidden parallel civilization underground. I just love these things. I mean, this thing is like my soul avatar right there. So there, yeah. I think the Dark Watcher phenomenon was one of the direct inspirations behind this character, but we don't know. We have to ask Jack Vance or his estate. And there's a similar phenomenon in the Ben Macdui Peak in Scotland, which is kind of like the highest mountain there. Apparently some people claim to encounter a phantom named Amfer Liathmor. Sorry for my pronunciation. But turns out this thing actually is real, and is probably based on an optical illusion called the Brocken specter. Not broken, broken specter. It's basically when the fog is a bit thick and it works like a projection screen. So your own shadow gets projected in the mist, but it appears like another entity. And if you've spent like hours or days in the mountains, low on food, water, exposed to the elements, it's very likely to see something like this while hiking or walking and confuse it with some supernatural entity. I mean, heck, I went on a 2-day long, very easy hiking trip once, and I'm a pasty city guy, and it was just so tiring that towards the end of my second day, I got lost in the mountains, and I started having hallucinations. And so something like this, I can understand how it works. It's a natural phenomenon. Before getting to the end, we got the famous Obama's reptilians case. This is just more like a run-of-the-mill conspiracy theory. Apparently, a kind of reptile-headed person was seen in the background of a Obama video. He looked like this, and of course, conspiracy theorists were on this like, I don't know, flies on dog shit, claiming that Obama himself was a reptilian and had reptilian bodyguards. And there was even a webpage calling the Reptilian Resistance Dragon Slayer RR Knight, and the whole website is written this way. It's a bit like the Zodiac Killer we saw earlier. Let's read a few select elite words here. The spirit has respected love for its creations. Cancer wants you to do whatever you want to do. That which is not its creation to destroy it, as long as your allegiance is to the Cancer. Blah blah blah. Apparently, according to this website's mythology, there's something like a globalist reptilian Cancer Satan, and it wants to destroy the core family. And you can see representatives of the force if you look closely enough. Well, too bad this was just a normal guy, just under bad light and with bad video compression. So yeah, I mean, I don't have much respect for criminal cryptids or cases like this. It's a case of paranoid pareidolia. And then in Paraguay, you got something called the Pombero, also known as Carai Fiarae. Sorry for butchering the words. It's basically a wild man who is also known as the Master of the Night. Basically, he roams around rural villages, and if you leave your wife alone at the house, he can come in and like assault her or something. This seems to be a common male fear. And you have to placate this guy by leaving cigarettes and booze in a tree trunk near your house. It's a short, hairy, and leprechaun-like creatures. He can change into animals, and if you disrespect him, he can catch ungrateful girls, force them to kiss him, and go beyond that. In rural Paraguay, apparently it's not uncommon for adults to leave gifts for him so that the pombero doesn't disturb them. It's one of the many indigenous legends from this area. There are also weird things in South America, like these people who can turn into pink river dolphins, but then they can also turn into handsome guys with white suits and charm ladies. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of these legends, like the changeling, kind of owe their presence to male insecurities, but I don't know. Anyways, this has been a nice selection of criminal cryptids from the world over. We saw real life criminals, we saw media hype, we saw the plight of people captured and caught in a techno-scientific super global urban civilization. We saw funny asides, we saw paranormal stuff. There were many things I could have included here, so if you have any suggestions that kind of fit this mold of a criminal cryptid, just let me know. But in conclusion, remember, as I'm telling these stories, I'm always building a topology for you guys, because I'm that kind of a guy. I'm a guy who likes to give. You know, I'm a giving sort of guy. Let's look at the realities we uncovered by studying these diverse and weird stories. Every person is a different entity. You know, I'm an entity, you're an entity, and in the present mystery-starved life that we all lead wherever we are, criminals are some of the scariest entities one can hope to encounter. In being so scary, they also acquire this almost paranormal vibe about themselves. We fear them, but we also secretly envy them. Remember, there are a lot of pop songs about, "Mommy, don't you know he's a criminal? Understand that love isn't rational, it's physical." You know, you don't see songs like that about hard, honest working people. Criminals are feared, but they're also weirdly sexually desired. I don't know. I mean, all the Netflix series are about crime because, I don't know. And extreme crime becomes the stuff of legend in our mystery-starved world. There's a thing I uncovered, which I call the urban-suburban fear circle, which is basically precipitated by several factors. This is not a scientific law, it's just my hypothesis, so like feel free to elaborate on this. But basically, when people give up a traditional agrarian lifestyle in the village, which is not without its own problems, I'm not trying to glorify this thing, but when they give this up, they move to suburban lives or urban lives in the big city, and in a couple of generations, something like an urban alienation becomes common. Even if you're in the suburbs, you don't know your neighbors. It's one vast, identical, easily replicable environment, whether you're in the cities or in the suburbs. You have media hype continuously pumping fear, wanting you to fear shit, because I used to think this was because of a need to control, but now these days I feel more like it's just because fear sells. And in the present day and age, the highest goal a media organization can aspire to are numbers. So it's a kind of feedback loop. Then people have genuine fears over their families and especially their kids. As I just told before, children are some of the scariest things an adult can face because of the reactions they engender in you, and you find yourself doing things and like feeling things you never thought would be possible. And in certain parts of the world, there are some risks, like school shootings and stuff. I mean, they're grisly and really dark and like really grim stuff. But actually, the risk of dying from a school shooting is pretty low. So these fears are being pumped. Like, I mean, and people really get irrational about them. Like, one of my weirdest anecdotes was like about a friend who just had kids. And like this lady was like, before she was married, was really outgoing and kind of like a wild person. Now after the fucking kid, I once was talking with her and she was writing a letter of complaint, okay, get a load of this, to this toy store, because the toy store had 3 stories and on each window they placed big teddy bears. And she was worried that kids might see these teddy bears and imitate these teddy bears and jump from windows and what the fuck? What kind of a fucked up fear of a shadow of a shadow of a shadow of a fear is this? But this is what parenthood does to some people. So I can't discredit this, but I can damn well laugh at it. It's ridiculous and you should be ashamed of yourself. Anyways, and then in this way, because people have kids, they feel scared about their kids, they move up in life, they move to suburbs, they have a house, they have things to fear, and then you get this disgusting phenomenon. You see it in the United States, but you see it everywhere, you know. These poor women jumping into their cars lest there be an ankle slasher down there. Whereas they're more likely to be killed by their partners, but anyways. So like being disgusted by other people, especially people with less means, becomes a kind of a class marker. And from then on, it becomes a self-propagating fear of others, fear of humanity, and here be cryptids, the criminal cryptids. I think this core feeling is one of the main causes driving this phenomenon. You know, everything you fear, lest it hurt your children, lest it hurt your class, your social standing, your sense of security, you know, it's another entity, it's inhuman, but let Daddy Cosman warn you, pursuing this line of thought will only lead you to darkness. And if something happens to you because of this, I mean, knock on wood, but you may have deserved it. Okay, anyways, moving on. Another conclusion about cryptozoology in general. So cryptozoology is a very broad and underappreciated form of modern folklore. And many people look at it in a sort of autistic way. They're, it's all about animals, unknown animals. But no! God damn it! It's a form of modern folk literature. These things must be recorded by university departments. There must be people writing PhDs about this shit. Not just one weird Turkish guy making unhinged videos. What are humanities departments doing? I mean, if I was like the dean of a big college or something, like, imagine they made me the dean of Columbia University, I would set up a program just like documenting and investigating cryptozoology folk studies. Because these stories, as we just saw, they encapsulate so much about society and people's perspectives of class, risk, family, and a whole lot of other things. These things must be recorded and studied, and they must be preserved for future generations to marvel and laugh at. Alright anyone, do you know any other criminal cryptids I didn't mention here? Please let me know in the comment section, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making and researching it, so please mention in the comments if you have any other cryptids to report, and maybe I can make a part 2 out of your submissions. And as always, thanks for watching. Please consider supporting me on patreon.com for the time I took to make this video, and please consider supporting Prometheum for her contributions to that intro segment right there. And that's all. That's it. That's all. Have a nice day and goodbye. Names. Now you may ask yourself, what did all these people do to deserve being here? Well, I'll tell you what they did. They supported me on patreon.com for as little as $1 per month. And let me tell you, it was freaking wonderful. If you did this, if you supported me on Patreon like all these chosen people, not only are you immune to the depredations of night demons and shit, but you are also able to access a downloadable version of the talk you just saw. So thank you all in advance. If you're supporting me, just ask your friends to watch this video. I got a 2-hour extravaganza right here for you. Watch it with a friend, watch it with a lover, get it on during the boring bits, and then later convert them to support me on Patreon as well. Because you know everyone, this horde will continue to grow, and together we shall make the world ours.